Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. If you heard that lovely little laugh at the start of the top, that was Brian punching a bird. No, that was him being really, really happy about talking about our next topic. As always, I'm Dr. Owen Campbell, and with me is Dr. Brian Wolf, and we are Physio Growth. Physio Growth is a mentorship. Oh God, man, I always kind of screw up this beginning
Nice.
ad read, right?
You
Like
don't.
you're very good at this.
You really don't. You just stumbled now, and now you fell on your face.
I know. Well, it's because of your hyena
It's
laugh.
because I was making fun of Owen for being bloated. That was what it was. It wasn't had nothing to do with this. Look at how we opened
Anyway,
this up. The
we've
first
we've
30
done
seconds.
this. We've done a lot of business stuff. We've earned the scars. Join our group so you don't have to have the scars, but you still get the smiles. We'll go with that.
Physio-growth.com. Check it out.
Physio-growth.com.
All right, Owen.
There
Take
we
us
are.
away. Lead us off
All
here.
right. Now that anybody listening to this truly thinks that we don't know what we're talking about.
So they're probably like, what the hell is going on here? Hopefully, this wasn't your first episode.
All right, so we are talking about the scalability of cash businesses, the boogeyman in the room, right? So everybody doesn't like the evil insurance companies, and I'm going to do cash my whole life, and I'm also going to be a bazillionaire. Well, a lot of people who are in the cash space, me included, kind of done you do the math and you realize, okay, well, that's going to be pretty hard to scale. And I think personally it's because people pay cash for you, they don't pay cash for your employees, right? And now, this being said, there have been people that have done this. There are people that have 2 3 clinics, right? Maybe they're inside a few CrossFit boxes, they've hopped on a rocket ship with somebody who owns a bunch of CrossFit gyms, something like that, where it can be done, right? It's not that it can't be, it's just significantly harder to do if you don't start at some point accepting insurances. So this, to give the listeners context, I did corporate PT where we're 98% insurance, and I built and scaled those businesses. Brian started as a cash-based therapist and then eventually built into a hybrid model, right? And he's got 5 clinics now with that hybrid model. And, give him a few more years, he'll have 10. So
Right.
he has lived through that cash stress. How do I scale? What makes it easier? And the thing that, before you go in and share what you've done, I just think, PTs have a great advantage in the fact that like insurance does pay for us, right? Like
Yep.
someone will spot people money for us, right? I mean, obviously they pay their premiums, but you know, not a lot of other professions have that, right? Like window cleaners
Yep.
don't have that, right? Plumbers don't have that. So these are the things where, yes, we can always talk about the bad things about insurance, and we have, but at the same point, we do have kind of a market advantage. Everyone knows what PT is, and most of their insurance plans will pay for it.
Yep.
So, Brian, if you want to, I let you kind of go on this topic because you've lived this transition.
I think the reality of and it's funny because I was talking about this with Jimmy McKay at the PT Pinecast, and one of the things he said to me, he goes, "Well, that's weird that you went from cash based to insurance. That's not really something that a lot of people do." And I said, "I go, it's a scalable model. It's a much more scalable model. And for those that think that I'm wrong, think about how many cash based practices have multiple locations.
Hmm.
Now, think about how many cash based clinics have 10 locations, 20,
Yeah.
30, 50." 100, 150 locations, 200. They don't exist, guys. They don't.
Well,
And so
and
the
in those
reality,
2 locations, by the way, there's one
yeah,
therapist, and they're
yeah,
half busy,
yeah.
right?
And the reality is like, and listen, this is me not talking smack on cash PT.
Mm,
It's just smacking people around that are cash based PTs that talk down about insurance. Because the reality is when it becomes to a scalable model, what you're really saying is you want to treat less paper, you want to do less paperwork, and you want to treat less patients. And again, we've talked about it's a smaller threat, it's a lower threshold for how to start, for sure.
yeah.
So the reality is, but when people think about going to cash based clinics, realize that you're if you're not, if it, they got to go in for the right reasons, right? And if the idea is I want to work for myself and grow and build a business and grow myself as I grow, I get it. I get it. However, realize that in a lot of specific places, there are ways to also build too. Like, I mean, Owen, let me ask this question. I'm going to interview Owen here a little bit, flip the script a little bit.
There you go.
When you went to Athletico, because I know about when you went to the clinics, when you went in Athletico, how
Yep.
many clinics did Athletico have?
900.
They had already had 900, massive.
Well, they did an acquisition.
Yeah.
So they started when I first got there, it was 650, and then they acquired another 300.
So if you think about this, right? So they acquired another 300, right?
Yeah.
Do you think if you were us, and
Hmm.
I'm curious, I'm curious about this. If you were like a newer physical therapist in a place that 5, 6, 7, 8 locations,
Hmm.
and was looking to keep building, and you were one of these guys entry, and you wanted to grow at the company, do you think that story would have been completely different with your narrative is growing? If you're like I'm like in that routine of growing, like for instance, if I look at Jag PT, John Galucci,
Yep.
those guys who sold their clinics when they had like 18 clinics, then went to this and this and this and this. If
Yep.
you're in that first part and then grew, does your concept change because you feel like you have more ownership of that,
Well,
right?
so the hard part is, and we can get into private equity buyouts and white label versus like Athletico likes to brand everything with
Yep.
Athletico, PRN, USPT. They tend not. I don't know about USPT, but I know PRN doesn't. Um, but my previous company before Athletico was basically in the Jag setup, right, where she
Yep.
had 25 clinics, shopping it around, talking to private equity. They white labeled it, right? So she kept her name, and then because it was really really popular in a major city, so they didn't want to mess with that. So there are a lot of very big benefits, right, to be able to do that. Now the problem is then it becomes a private equity play, and then who's doing what, right? But the nice thing is she had the option. She had investors, right? But they
Yep.
were kind of small fry investors before she got private equity, right? She just wanted to get out. But we took on investors early on in the process, and they were just like, dude, I just want to make like 3x over like 5 years.
Yeah.
And we interviewed these investors. We said, like, look, we do not want you to force patients down our throat. And she just says, like, look, I need to buy like two more clinics and I want to do it before the guys down the street do. Right. So if you find the right investors at that level, people are willing to put money into that and
For sure.
also let you do what has been working. And you just say, look, my issue is a little bit of capital. Like, I'd love to have $100,000 in cash flow right now, but I don't. So I can't open that clinic for another 2 years. They'll say, cool, we'll open it for you. And then you just keep doing your thing. And eventually, like, if we sell it to someone bigger, we get more money. So that's what those people like Jag are doing, right?
Yeah.
If they haven't done private equity, I don't know. I'm not,
They
you know,
did
I
private
don't.
equity.
Yeah.
So
So,
just to shift gears here,
yeah.
when we think about these. So I don't want to get off topic.
Sorry,
No, no, you're
I go
good.
to the corporate stuff.
I'm gonna pull them back in. My
we
point
are
being
we are a
is,
scaling podcast.
yes, my point being to some people is that when you think about these bigger companies, right, and where they started, none of them started at cash based, right? Or if they did, they pivoted to insurance.
Yeah.
And again, there's different ways to build your business and build your company. But again, if you're like, I want to grow to one of these bigger companies, it's impossible to do. I don't like to use the word impossible because maybe it is, but it's much, much harder to do from
Yeah.
that perspective. So because you're competing against the other big guys is the problem. Because you got simple scales and simple, to your point, to go back to Owen, when it comes back to the cash based thing. Now say you're like, hey, I only want to open up one location. That's fine. Then I would make the argument to a lot of people that they should be a solopreneur to a certain degree. Because if
Mhm.
the thought process is, there's a lot of headache around some of the other pieces, and we've worked with other people who, as they become, as they grow their business, one of the things that they recognize is, all right, well, like I want to give some more piece stuff to other people. I want to grow. I want to help, have other therapists. I want to have, the services. As you start to get into that model, the issue becomes now you got to teach more skills than just physical therapy. And
Yep.
that's a challenge. You got to find talented people. And so by drawing those specific talented people, you got to pay. And the problem
Yep.
that comes with cash-based physical therapy when you're a solopreneur is you can't pay because you can't afford it because you don't make enough money. And so the
Yep.
reality of this scenario is this is where people find themselves is how do I get to step 2, 3, 4, 5? And
Mhm.
so the reality of what happens in these scenarios is sometimes people might be better, in a scenario where they're building a business and find a situation where they can grow with a company and build with a company. I mean, Owen obviously was jumping in a company where it had 900 locations, was trying to build in a ladder that way, and found himself to be in a weird spot. If you're one of the entry level people trying to build something big, that's also cool. But I think you really got to think about, again, philosophically, and people have asked us this on different stuff. And we've been asked this, I think, on podcasts too, on right, like, what would you do if there were this? What would you do in this scenario? I was like, well, what do you want to do?
Yep.
Right? What do you want to do? How do you want to build your business? If it's to get to, again, Athletico, the
Mhm.
Jags, the ATIs, those big practices, cool. Then you got to think about how to start figuring out the next steps could be figure out how do I start accepting insurance and how do I grow that?
Well,
If
and I
you're like,
think,
hey, I want to be a solo practice and I want to go to like 2 or 3 locations, it can be done. It can be done with cash, but even again, I would say it's harder to scale. So yeah,
yeah, I agree. And I think that, as you know, I'm one that I would like to have a big asset at the end of my working career, right? Like I'd like to have something that I could sell to somebody. I make a reasonable living within my means through my career. And then I decide, hey, make retirement a lot easier if I can sell it, right? And I think that the game plan, at least today, is cash based because cash flow, right? So it's a lot easier to keep your lights on in your house by taking cash, right? As long as you can network a little bit, you'll eventually, with some PRN jobs, you get through that first year, 2 years, 3 years, right? Offer the convenience, offer it to high net worth individuals, everything's fine, right? The difference then becomes, I think that the pivot comes when you get enough money to be able to have a location. And then once
yeah,
you have that location, then you take advantage of the fact that you don't have to travel and you start taking the better paying insurances. So at least you aren't like, your average revenue per visit is fine, right?
yeah,
And then you see where that goes. Now, I have a history of managing big teams. So for me, I'm comfortable with that, right? But like you said, you got to know your self. A lot of people who go out into PT and start their cash based business did it because they just hated management. They hated all
exactly.
these people. They just wanted to treat their patient and do it as hands off as they can from anyone else besides themselves. Perfect, great, awesome. But if you want to make it an asset, that pivot has to come somewhere.
Yeah, and I think the bigger mistake that I think people make is thinking that getting into the cash based world means you're going to treat less, right? At
Yeah.
least initially. And I think that the aspect of these kind of things is like how do I build, right, my business, how I'm doing what I'm doing in a way that allows me to grow into what I want to do. And
Yeah.
so again, that person who's like, I just want to treat my patient the way I want to treat them as best I possibly can. Well, then going that solopreneur route makes sense. But I
Mhm.
also think that developing stuff within your organization makes sense also.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that there's just a lot of stuff at stipulation, I think, around the rose covered the rosy glasses around cash-based physical therapy and then the jadedness against insurance-based stuff. And I
Well,
just think that's bad. I think it's also wrong. I think
yeah.
there's not like it's just an incorrect vision on that stuff.
Well, and we've all been in the clinics, well, maybe the listeners may or not have been, and I do understand. I do sympathize with the fact that like there are people listening to this that their only introduction to PT has been terrible mill clinics. I was very, very fortunate that I did not have that experience in insurance, right? I felt that I was never really overly pressured. Yeah, there were some tough days, but never really overly pressured to the point that I couldn't think of it. My first job did kind of suck. I will say that. But like 10 out of 13 years in insurance based, I felt like I was able to give everything. So
Yeah.
these are the things that, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts, is how you build your business, not how you get paid. Right.
Yep.
And these are where you can do things like what you're doing, 40-minute treatments that allows you to be one-on-one, but while also getting like say 3 units instead of two, those types of things that you can make conscious decisions as the owner to still be patient first. Right. While also saying that the only people you're going to treat everybody on your street, not just the ones with the fancy cars, right? So
100%.
these are the things where a lot of it, I think, honestly, like what you said, is just what you want out of it, right?
Yeah, man.
Because you could, I mean, you could also be very, you could have no, you could, if you live within your means and you only want to treat 3 people a day, the best way to do that is to just raise your prices every year. You're going up, and
100%.
you won't be busy at all if you're $400 an hour. But if you get 2 or 3 patients a day, cool, you made your money, right?
That's where
Those
you
are
see so
those
many
are
of
the
these
things.
things. You see so many of these things of like start your online coaching business, start your online this, online that. That's
Mhm.
what they're doing. They're just
Yeah.
teaching you how to say, hey, let's get 20 patients. And then when you get a threshold, just keep raising your prices to 10K a month.
Yep.
That's what they're doing. And then by
Yeah.
doing online stuff, but like here's the thing,
Start at
you're still
50.
yeah, you're still
It's
staring at a
50 an
computer
hour.
like this. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? You're still staring at a computer, just being like, all right, this, do that, do this, do that. Like, is that what you want
Yeah.
to do? Is
Yeah.
that what you want to do? And if you want to do that, I don't really, again, that's
Yeah.
fine. But again, I think it's also shit. I
Yeah.
personally, I think it's like
Well,
to me,
I want a cool place that my daughter can like. she can work out in, right? Like
Yeah,
they can like help learn how to do the business, all that stuff. There's a lot to it, but just this is more of a way of kind of saying, like, if you want that like really generational wealth, right, and you want to really create that, you got to be able to scale, and just cash is so much harder to scale,
for sure.
especially when people want like you have to
Yes,
be great at hiring. Like, my God, if you could hire people who all successful business entrepreneurs, I think I've maybe crossed paths with like 6 or 7 of them in 13 years of hiring, right? So like, it's tough. So
agreed.
anyway, with
Agreed.
that, Brian, I want you to do the ad read because I screwed it up
Let's
at the
do it.
beginning.
All right. So if you want to talk about stuff like this, we help people who are cash based practice, insurance based practice, all sorts of different levels, right? And we help them scale their businesses in any direction, right? So again, focus on your goal, whether you're just starting out, whether you're trying to build something within a business, whatever you're trying to do, physio-growth.com. Come check out our group, come talk to us. You can set up meetings with us. You can do, again, you can jump in our group, jump in our calls, take our trainings, whatever, and help grow practice. And we can help you in so many different ways. So happy to help
Yeah,
anytime.
between the two of us, we've done a lot of stuff. All right.
Exactly. And help you
So
make some money.
with that, my friend, we are out.
Cool. See you, man.
See ya.